Hey everyone, in this episode of the podcast, we are talking about college for a certain major and whether it's even worth it to get a higher education because so much information is online nowadays. You can take online courses and all that kind of stuff on Google and YouTube, and maybe it's not worth it. I don't know. What do you think, Jess?
Honestly, I feel like it depends on the person. I feel like you could go either way. For example, for my job, I feel like it's a lot easier, or just really any job, to have a degree. And that's kind of why I am, you could say, pro-college in a way, because I feel like it's a good way for companies, for people to kind of have that, like, same foundational, not level, like foundation, right? Like if you have a college degree, they can
like a baseline.
kind of, a baseline. That's the word I'm looking for. They can like actually, have a good understanding of like, okay, they went to a 4-year college, they got an education, they went through these courses, and they have some sort of knowledge, right? Compared to somebody who may not have those credentials. They might not maybe have the same experiences that someone with a college degree has. Obviously, that's so super, super generalized, right? Like, you could say the same for someone who didn't go to college and got, real life experience. Like, some might argue that that's even better than, a 4-year degree. But I do think going to college and getting a degree is definitely helpful to get your foot in the door when you don't have any other experience, right? Like, if you go to college, oftentimes people, that's like their one requirement for an entry level is like you need a 4-year degree, you need or some sort of certification at the very minimum. And I feel like nowadays actually companies are actually saying like if you don't have a 4-year degree, you need to have XYZ like certifications or a couple years of experience, like they instead of having a college degree. So again, I feel like it depends on profession and the people too. But yeah, what do you think?
It's interesting that you bring up that there are some jobs or some companies that just require a certification or some sort of years of experience instead of like in lieu of a 4-year degree. I think that's really interesting. I would like to know more about that actually, because like how does that even work? Like how do you get experience without a degree? Like how does that work? Like in your field?
So it really depends. So I know Google, Amazon, and some other big names like that have their own certification classes. For example, I think Google has this free program that you can take that you'll take courses on. They'll pretty much train you, and then at the end you'll take a test, and then once you pass it, you get certified. And then depending, I think you can also apply to a program that they have so that you take those courses and then you apply to the job and they can see that you've done it. And that's kind of like their requirement. And then from there, they kind of use that program to kind of train those people and then hire them full time. And so people might not have a college degree because they went through that program. And I know other people have also done something similar, like AWS, which is an Amazon cloud-based computing thing. They also have their own certification, so that really helps people get their foot through the door. And I'm sure there's a lot of other companies that I can't think of right now. There's also, like, MIT does a lot of free online classes, and so that doesn't require a 4-year college degree. But yeah, I think it really depends on the company, right? Like, every company is a little bit different. The requirements are a little bit different. Some companies are a little bit more lenient and they don't really care that you don't have a 4-year, whereas if you have like hands-on experience, they're like, okay, fine, and kind of give you a shot. So interesting.
I think it's I guess in the film world, like the professional filmmaking scene, it's a little bit different. If you're going freelance, you obviously don't actually need to have a college degree because no one actually cares that you you went to college for that. As long as you can make the video look good and stuff like that, that's really what matters. If you are working in a corporate corporate filmmaking world, like so you're going to a studio or something where you're expected to know certain things, then usually those companies would require a 4-year degree. But in general, I would say, especially for filmmaking, you don't actually need a college degree. Now I went to a 4-year college, got my degree and everything. So it's I have like experience with like freelancers and also going through the school route. And I think you can definitely learn everything about filmmaking online through YouTube and through Google. There's a lot of stuff that is available online that you don't necessarily need to go to school for anymore. But with that being said, I think most people need to go to school. I think most people, like I think you said it pretty well is that it really depends on like the person, and I think most people do not have a rigid structure for themselves. They don't create the rigid structure that they need in order to get through the material, because they're, you know, whatever you do, there's always going to be a lot of like material that you need to learn, just basic knowledge, things that you need to get right, in order to work in that field. So I think school is really helpful in that way, where they give you a structure. And, you know, it might not be right for everybody. And if you are not planning to go through school, you have to think of some way to push yourself through it, even when you don't have any motivation, especially when you don't have any motivation to get, you know, to do the homework, to actually go through the curriculum, for yourself. So I think in general, I am, definitely pro college. I think college gives you that structure, to get through, the material and the homework that is required to have like a baseline, like you said, a baseline knowledge of like whatever you're trying to do. I understand, like, you know, college is not for like everybody. And if college isn't for you, and if you figure out that, you know, going to school every day is, you know, not, it doesn't fit, you know, your lifestyle or whatever, you like your learning, habits and stuff, you have to find your own way of teaching yourself. You have to find your own way of like going through the material, because like, if you don't, then, you know, you aren't up to standard to where everyone is. And if you're trying to look for a job in like that particular field, then you have to be, you know, up to this bare minimum standard of like getting into the company or into the field that you want to go into. Yeah.
I feel like a college degree, like I said before, really helps you get through the door, because they know that you have that baseline, and then you don't have to prove yourself as much, right? Like for me, for instance, like if you get a degree, they know you're going to take XYZ classes, right? Regardless of what university you go through, they're going to make you take that because it's a standard across all colleges, right? Obviously, there's different electives and other things that you can take throughout college, but at the very minimum, we at least know, okay, we're going to hire a graduate from XYZ college. We should kind of know, you know, that they know this stuff, and if they don't, then they're probably not a good candidate, you know? Whereas if someone comes in and they have no degree, all I'm, you know, relying on is their word against, I guess, my opinion of them. And if they don't really have a degree or credentials or anything that backs it up, obviously work experience is a different story. But if you're just a high school graduate that doesn't go to college and just wants to, you know, get a full-time job, honestly, it depends on the job, right? There's some jobs that don't require a 4-year degree. But for those that do, for the most part, I feel like it's a lot tougher when you don't have some credentials behind, you know, your resume, because you don't have that work experience either.
Yeah, so. Exactly. In my field, in the world of filmmaking, there are a ton of like exceptions to this rule, where you like, because it's such a like creative field, you don't necessarily need to have like the formal education to back everything up, because you can just show up with a nice looking portfolio, and the portfolio is just like stuff you've shot, you know, in your free time and trying to get better at your craft. So you don't necessarily need to have like a resume, like a piece of paper, as long as you have something that looks good, a reel or like some sort of creative project that you did that looks good, and you can show to different clients and companies, then they more likely will try and hire you. So Quentin Tarantino, Steven Spielberg, I don't know if Steven Spielberg actually went to college. I know Quentin Tarantino didn't actually go to school for filmmaking, but you know, he's a very successful filmmaker, and he's like a huge, like those people are like super successful because they're such an outlier, right? They push themselves every single day to learn and get better at their craft of filmmaking. Whereas most of the people who I went to school with are not, right? Like, I don't know, most of the people who I went to college with were in my major did not even end up being in the filmmaking, in doing anything related to filmmaking, which kind of sucks. You know, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, it's because like it would have been nice to like, you know, have friends all over the industry and stuff like that. But like, you know, most of them are not in the industry at all. I can only count like a handful of people who actually like continued, because it's hard. It is really hard, you know, even if you have a 4-year degree. So it's hard to like find a way to get into the industry and get jobs that way. But it is possible without a 4-year degree. You just have to be super like hardworking. You have to, you have to be super hardworking, or else you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like it depends on the profession, right? Like if it's a
Yeah.
more creative field, then I think your work speaks for itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's professional or personal, if you have the skill sets to shoot a beautiful image or shoot a beautiful video or paint a beautiful picture, like that speaks for itself, right? I feel like you don't really need to go to school unless you really want to and you want to learn like super specific techniques or, you know, terminology, just so that you can understand the lingo. I could see that being beneficial. But yeah, I definitely feel like there's tons of professions out there that you probably don't need a college degree for, and it might be just a waste of money.
It's a lot of I've noticed like a lot of like service based professions. Like for example, this is one I know pretty well: wedding planning. Like, you don't, there's no classes
Probably not, no,
right?
yeah.
There's no, like, maybe like communications major might help.
Yeah.
But like, you don't necessarily go to school for like wedding planning kind of thing. You just kind of
just learn on the job.
It. Yeah, exactly. You start small and, you know, you have nice pictures of like the stuff that you did and then you show it to the next client and, you know, on and on like that.
Right.
So there isn't, but it's like, again, you have to understand like how to like educate yourself in when you're looking to go into that field. I'm sure like, you know, the most successful wedding planning companies didn't start out, you know, with like a huge team or whatever. They have to do everything by themselves, and like it's a lot of learning. You have a lot of like learning to do. So I feel like, again, if you're not someone who is like going to be really hard on yourself to learn everything, then it's I think it's much better that you go to some sort of like place where they give you some sort of like structure or like a curriculum at least.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, tests suck and all that, but at the same time, it forces you to learn, right? Like if you were just continuously going into class and then just attending and you don't pay attention at all because you don't need to, right? Unless you really want to, or just like hands-on work too. I feel like it's the best way to learn, regardless of what profession, right? Like I feel like tests are one thing, and I feel like they're standardized because they need to know if you know the material before passing you. But I feel like you really learn when you actually start to like code or start to actually film stuff or, you know, get your hands dirty and like actually try the thing that you're learning in class. I liked college. I feel like it's fun too because you're so young and you're surrounded by all these people who are super like-minded or not like-minded, and you learn so much, like not just about your major, like you learn, you know, electives that you take, you meet different people. Like I feel like it's just a really fun time, especially if you go to college right after high school. Because you're just so young, and I just remember college sounding so fun and like all that stuff, and I thought it was fun. I thought it was like looking back, I'm really glad I went to college instead of just you know, doing something else. Because I feel like it did bring me a lot of different opportunities, and it introduced me to people that I probably wouldn't have met if I didn't go to college, right? I probably wouldn't have got my job because of that, just because it kind of helped being in college and then going to that next step because there's connections with the college and the company that I work for. And so it was a lot easier to transition and to like intern while I'm at college too. And that was super helpful. On top of getting a college degree, like having that hands-on experience during the school years was really awesome. And I think a lot of people can have those connections too by going to college. It definitely helps. I feel like college to me is a crutch, if that's the right word, or maybe like a ladder, like something to help you get to the next step, right? Like you're so young that you don't really know. Yeah, a stepping stone, right? I don't think it really hinders your path. Maybe it does for some people, but for me, for instance, I feel like it really helped me. It helped me take the time to grow. Like an 18-year-old, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, right? And like having those 4 years to kind of figure out what I want to do, if this is what I want to do, if that's not what I want to do, and it kind of explore different things, right? And I don't know, I feel like college is fun and it's beneficial. And I feel like the 4 years just flew by for me. So
right. And just really quick, tell people like what your major was in college.
Oh yeah, I was a computer science major.
Yeah, perfect. And then I went to school for cinema and television arts. I think that's what they called it.
Fancy.
CTV. Yeah, cinema and television arts. Yes, that's what it was.
That's cool.
Basically filmmaking. It's basically filmmaking. But and so you went. Did you go to the community college route or no? You went to you just jumped straight.
Years,
okay, straight to 4 years. Okay, so cool. Yeah, and I went through the community college. I did 3 years at 2.5 at community college, and then 2 years at a 4-year college down here in LA. Let's go back to the test part. I feel like there are some people who are like super good at like test taking, and that doesn't necessarily translate into like real world, like a real world application. Were you someone who was really good at taking tests?
No. Not at all. I remember like stressing out, just like trying to study every time for tests. I was never a good test taker. I think partially is too, I second guess myself. And so I'm sitting there like, oh, it's A. No, it's not A, it's C. And I like go back and forth, and then I'll select the answer. And then at the very end of the test, I'll like check over my answers. Yeah. And I'll be like, oh no, it's C. And then I get the test back and it was freaking A. And I was like, why did I do that every time? I like don't just trust myself. So
that's so funny.
I hated the test part, honestly. I just like, damn, like I knew it, but I just was so nervous or anxious or however I was feeling that day. And just,
Would you say like in instead of like tests, would you have been more comfortable if you had to actually like do something hands-on? Like what if, for example, like you had to build like a small little like app? I don't know what that would look like instead of a test. Oh, okay.
We had to do that. So like that was kind of our homework in our upper division classes. That was like you would have to create projects, and our homework would be iterations of building onto that project on top of the test. So I think the tests were more like fundamentals, and then the projects were like, okay, now use this like to actually do something with it.
Right. I see. Yeah. I think for me, tests were pretty linear. I did second guess myself too sometimes. But I think for the most part, like linear in the way that if I read a question and I draw a blank, I'm like, there's no point. I'm just going to guess. I'm not going to come back. Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
That's because I didn't study it. And I know I didn't study it. Like, it's not one of those things where I'm like, oh, did I study it? Maybe this is the answer. Like, maybe I can, finesse my way through it, or something. But like, for me, I'm like, if I knew that I didn't like, if a question reads foreign to me, if it like feels weird or whatever, then I knew I didn't study for it, or I didn't study for the test properly. And I'm like, okay, well, good luck on the next one. Maybe next time. We'll try again.
Dang, that's an interesting way of test taking.
Yeah.
If it were me, I'd probably sit there for the entire time, like at the very end, trying to figure it out. And I'd skip it and come back to it.
I remember doing physics, AP physics in high school. And those tests were like, those killed that. Yeah. No, that class killed me. I got like a C in that class because I just didn't understand the material. And also the tests were like really confusing. I just suck at like word problems.
Yeah, those are hard. I mean, physics in general is a beast. Like,
yes.
I took it in college again, and it was still just as hard. It was a little bit easier just because I remembered some of the stuff, but still, it was difficult still.
I like the point that you brought up about like college being like a place where you can kind of explore different things besides your like major. Because like when I went to community college, I obviously you have to do, what is it called? Like the basic stuff? GE, GE, general education. Yeah, general ed. Like obviously you have to do like your general ed classes, but because you have to do general ed classes and are not classes that are focused on filmmaking, like I learned so much about other things. Yeah. And I could bring that back into filmmaking. For example, humanities. I took a humanities class, and we went over all of the different periods of like art and all these culture and stuff like that. So like the Renaissance, the Baroque period, all these kind of like, and even before that, all those different time periods in history. And I was able to look at all these types of like paintings and stuff like that I would never have like seen ever, like even paid attention or like didn't even know where to go look. And there's tons of lighting concepts. Of course, I know. There's tons of lighting concepts I see in those paintings that directly relate to modern day filmmaking. Like, for example, one of them is called chiaroscuro, where it's like very hard, harsh light, where it's like a beam of sunlight, and the rest of the painting is like in darkness, and it forces the viewer to look at that specific part where it's like light, where it's lit. And so like I see that in modern day filmmaking. It's such a huge we call that film noir in filmmaking terms. And so like I'm looking at all these like paintings. I'm like, wow, there's like so many like amazing like techniques that they use in painting that directly translated over to motion picture, which I thought was like incredible. And I would never have like learned that if I didn't take a humanities class, if we didn't have to do GE classes, you know. So I think that's really cool. And there's always like stories, like you read books and stuff like that. There's always like stories that pop up throughout history and kind of like general themes that you see over and over again that translate to movies, to films and all these kind of stuff. So I think it's really interesting. Like I think college is like, especially like the people around you, like you said, if you're in a group of people who are like-minded, then, you know, you guys move together. Usually you guys move together and like you work on the same projects, you have the same interests, and you just sort of like try and, especially if it's like a competitive friendly competition, like a, you know, a group that's like sort of like driven, then, you know, you can be highly motivated in an environment like that versus if you were to go by yourself and maybe sit at home and do the courses online and stuff, you don't necessarily have that same community. And I think community is super important, especially right. Exactly. So like, are there any examples that you have from college that sort of mirror this?
Do I? Dude, it's so like, well, I feel like everybody has these days, but huddling in a library or huddling in a conference room with your team or just like people that you're in the same class with at like midnight is so humbling, and you're like, fuck, we're in this together now, aren't we? Like, it's just like we're drinking coffee and like, or I remember it would be like we would book a library room. I think you only could do it for like a certain time, but we would each book an hour and we just rotate, you know, who gets the room, and then we'd all come and like throughout like passing periods and stuff, we'd come back to the room and like study for our stuff. So yeah, no, I definitely feel that. I feel like throughout college, I met so many different people and had so many like different communities. For like my math class, I had a certain group that I'd go to, and they were all really, really smart. And then, I mean, everybody I met with was super smart in their own ways. And then, like, every class I would have, like, a different group of people or, like, similar groups of people. And it was cool because a lot of those people that I knew also knew each other because we're on the same major for the most part. And everybody kind of knew everybody. And so it was kind of fun because you have this, like, big group of people that you're like, oh, yeah, like, I remember you from that class or this class. And yeah, I think it's really cool to be able to, like, walk down the hall and, like, you know, see a bunch of people that you know and be like, hey, how'd you do on this? Or, like, you know, catch up with them and, like you said, like have that sense of community. I feel like that's a huge part of college, and I do miss that. I think it's really cool to see somebody that you've known for a while, and you're like, oh, like I can't believe, you know, I've known them for X, Y, Z, and
it was really cool. Like for me personally, like my experiences in college, like being in a so me and my best friend Matt, I met him through some like screenwriting class, and we kind of hit it off, and we were like, we had very similar interests in filmmaking, and like I taught him everything that I knew, and so pretty much I don't know if this is true or not, but like everyone in school, like in our year, kind of like low key like looked up to us because like we were doing so many things. Like I don't know how many people in our year were volunteering on the weekends outside of school to do like PA gigs, grip, you know, being on set and stuff like that. I'm sure there were some, but like I don't remember too many people who were like spending their weekends just being on set and stuff like that outside of class. Yeah, it was cool to have someone else with you that like was also super driven, also was super interested in the field. And so we were able to, you know, get on set a lot and learn so much more. Actually outside of class, like a lot of the stuff that we learned in class didn't really apply in the real world. I learned so much about how a set works, like a filmmaking set works, outside of class, because like even in my cinematography class, where we're supposed to learn about cinematography, I learned so much more just one weekend on set as a PA, you know, rigging up lights and holding different equipment and being able to be exposed to like a group of like really professional people who like know their stuff really, really well. So yeah, being hands-on, I think is much different than sitting in a classroom and just like reading over textbooks and stuff like that.
For sure. No, I agree. I feel like I have the same experience because when I was in college, I was learning all these things, and then I think second or third year, I started interning. And that really gave me real life experience, like taking the things that we learned in class and actually applying it, because I learned these things and I was like, okay, cool. But then like actually hearing those things like during professional settings, I was like, oh, that's what that means. And like, it was just kind of nuts to be able to put those two together. I feel like I had like an aha moment during my internships, like multiple of them were like, oh, that's why we need to know this. Or like, oh yeah, I remember this. And just being able to apply it is nice to feel like, okay, I mean, some of the stuff I may not use ever, but a lot of the stuff I was able to apply in real life situations, which was really cool to see. Like, okay, I'm not wasting my time.
Yeah, that's funny. Do you think you could have learned what you learned online or through YouTube or through Google?
For sure.
And then just go through the internship and like do just as well?
If I were to be able to learn all the fundamentals, then yeah, probably. I honestly think if I were to learn, I feel like I could probably learn more on YouTube and online if I really, really was motivated and tried really hard. Because, yeah, there's so many resources out there now, especially for CS majors or just engineering majors in general. Like, you could probably learn how to code in a month, 2 months, like, actually build something. But, yeah, I don't see why you couldn't learn the same things as you would in a college setting. It's one thing to learn it. It's another of how to get a job after you learn that stuff. That's the tough part, right? Like, no one's going to be like, oh, yeah, are you sure you know this stuff? You know, like, maybe, like, I don't even know if you would get the interview unless you know somebody personally that you're like, hey, like, look, I've been doing all these classes. Can you try and get me an interview with XYZ? But if you're just like a regular person that's trying to apply to Google and they have no idea who you are and they don't see a college degree on your paper, then it's gonna be like, okay, you know, you're out of the pile type of thing. So but if you can get a job or like a interview and not have a college degree, I feel like that's awesome. You know, it's good for you, because it's really tough, I feel like, to not have a college degree and get an internship or an interview.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think it really goes back to like the point that I made earlier was that if you're not motivated to put in, what is it, 8 hours, or how many hours do we put in a day? Like 8, 10? I don't know how many you put in for during college, but like 8 hours a day, too many. But like 8 hours a day straight, or not straight, but like, you know, 8 hours a day learning and absorbing all this material, then like you could do it in a month, right? But like for most people, like if you're not on it, then, you know, it might take you half a year or like a year, or like, you know, you'll drag yourself out, and eventually you might lose motivation to even continue pursuing this, you know, career. If you're not in school, no one's like pushing you to do the curriculum, you know? So is it possible to do it without college? Yeah. But like, you just have to be highly, highly motivated to do it, even if you don't have the motivation on some days. Do you think school has taught people to go out and work for themselves? Because like people like Mark Zuckerberg went to school for like coding, but I feel like school doesn't really teach you how to be like an entrepreneur or like how to start a company, if that's, you know, something that people are eventually wanting to do. Because like, I know like you want to eventually become like a manager of some sort, or just like have people under you and do less coding. But has school actually like taught you anything about how to become a manager or how to do anything like that?
No, and I feel like that kind of example, like taking the manager example, it's kind of, you need to interact with people, right? Like that's not something you can really learn from school. I feel like that's something you need to learn from doing, or by seeing, or by shadowing, whatever it may be. I definitely think there's some aspects of like an MBA, for example, that can lend itself to help you kind of figure out like, okay, these are the steps I need to take to become a good leader or to become a successful entrepreneur. Do you need an MBA to be a successful entrepreneur? Probably not. Will it help? Maybe. I don't know. And it honestly, again, comes down to the person. Like if you're going to take what you learn from school and actually run with it, then it's probably going to work out well for you. But if you're just going to school just to get the degree and then not really do anything with it, then probably not. I don't think it's necessary to get a degree to become an entrepreneur. I feel like a lot of it is just by learning and talking to your peers, talking to people who've done it. You know, I feel like that's truly the best way to learn that kind of stuff. When
I went to school, like film classes, they only taught you like basically the idea of film school was that you finish film school, you go PA on set, you work from the bottom, you work however many years and you get all the way to the top. that, then you break into like the movies, the big leagues, and you're working on sets of like, huge TV shows or reality shows or narrative and film stuff, right? But and that was like the subtle idea. I could feel the subtle, that sort of narrative being pushed onto film students. And yeah, a lot of us like did go through the PA route, did start at the very bottom of a company and tried to work our way up. And you have to play a lot of like, obviously like politics, office politics and stuff like that. It's kind of annoying, especially if you're working in that corporate world, and try to work your way from the bottom all the way up to the top. Like I knew, and some people were very successful doing that. People I've known went to CBS, and they were like, yeah, they worked on a reality show. They started, as a PA pretty much, as an assistant, and then worked all the way up to like a program like manager or something like that, where they or a production manager, and so where they manage all those different aspects of the show and stuff. And so like some people were like actually made it. So that I'm like super happy to see those kind of people. But for a lot of us, it's a lot of hard work. Like PA is like no joke. Like you're just doing like shit work. It's like low quality work. And so like a lot of people can't get through it and just don't know where to go from there. And that's what school doesn't teach you. It's like, okay, cool. Like I'll teach you the basics of like how to get the entry level job. But now how do you move up? Now and then from there they just kind of let you go and good luck. They say good luck. Which was very, for me, annoying because like I was lost for like a long time doing freelancing, and I thought you had to go through grip work and like very like grueling, hard, like physically demanding jobs in order to get to the next level. And at a certain point I was like, you know what, this is not working out. Like I'm just like killing myself for like no money at all. And so started doing freelancing, and that's what like film school didn't teach me, was like the business side of filmmaking, because they don't expect you, or they don't think that people would go into like the freelancing route. And there's a whole nother side of like the business side of like filmmaking that doesn't get taught in school. And I'm sure like I don't know how much you've learned about like business side of computer programming, if there or computer science, if there even is.
I don't know if there is. I mean, unless you're, I feel like you learn on the job, because if you have like a customer facing application, then you probably learn like, oh, this is what you do when this happens, or this is how you talk to this people, or all that stuff. I feel like that's something you learn on the job. I feel like for you, I wonder if they'll change it up, because with like different freelancing jobs, I feel like it's more common nowadays. I'm sure it was still common back then, but with like the blow up of social media, I feel like that's even more. Although you probably don't need to go to film school if you're TikTok stars, so I feel like that applies to any major. Is like, damn, I really wish they taught us something about this. I wish they taught us about taxes in high school, or like how to
buy a house,
buy a house, change your tires, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm sure there's so many things out there, and I feel like school is not the place to learn everything, right? It's a starting place. It's a good start. And then you kind of have to dictate what you want to do, right? Like, if you want to learn this thing, go out and get it, Go take a different class. Go online and search it up. Like I don't think school is meant to have all the answers for you. I think it's up to the person to take what school taught you and then move forward from there.
That's it for this episode. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode. If you want more content from us, make sure to follow us on our social media channels. We'll have links in our bio or description. Have a great day.